Good afternoon, everyone. This is Bruno from 360 Suite. Usually people who are used to see me, they always hear, good morning, because usually I'm based in the awesome city of Boston. But today, actually, I'm in France in the super shiny city of Lille in northern France. Well, you might think, well, what the hell, Bruno, are you doing there today? So, well, I have to say the first thing is tonight there is actually a soccer game, France-Germany. You guys all know who's going to win. And by the way, if you want to predict who's going to win, just put the score tonight, just in the chat box on the right. I'm saying it's going to be France 2-1, but we'll see. We shouldn't joke too much with Chris because actually he's from Finland, and we know what the results were on Saturday. They played very well, and it's the outsider of this cup. So I know as well, Patrick, who's on, is also a big soccer fan. So we'll have a lot of fun today.
I do have money on Germany, Bruno. So
it's we'll need to talk about that later on. So
I do work for a German company after all. Come on.
Okay, I guess that that's acceptable. Okay. And then also today is the great thing is I think we have over 400 people that have registered for this event, so that's really great. And the goal of this event is to exchange around PCE. Okay, what is PCE? It's the private cloud edition, so the Business Object Cloud edition that actually can be hosted on Google Cloud, AWS, or Azure as an example. And how is the event of today going to be organized? Okay, first of all, the different speakers that we have today is, okay, we'll have Pauline from 360 Suite. She's based in DC. We'll have also Keith Johnson that will be presenting. He's the CTO from CBeyond Data. And then we'll have, two COEs, Chris Pritchard, who's actually based in Finland. And then we've got Patrick Sims. We don't need to present him anymore. You guys all know he's in DC. So, and he doesn't support the right soccer team. And then we'll have also Patrick Nismus from Protiviti that will talk to the experts. So as always, this event is recorded. And by the way, it's also live. You can check the recording afterwards on 360suite.io or on 360 Suite's YouTube page. Let's get things started up. Patrick, Chris, I'll pass it over to you and just explain us what is PCE, how it works in terms of licensing, why should people go? And I have to say, actually, I was very intrigued initially by PCE because I've seen numerous customers, I think since January this year, that have been going to PCE with success. And it's definitely a package that we've seen a lot of traction. So maybe I shouldn't say things like that. No, it's not another SAP package that we've seen before. It's a very good package. Yes. And there's a lot of value going there. That's why we're presenting today with SAP. Go ahead, guys.
Right. Chris, did you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Bruno. Hey, everyone. First time on the GBN Smith call, and thanks for inviting me, Bruno. And my name is Chris Pritchard, so I'm part of the solution management for analytics, covering the areas of business objects and SAC. And like Bruno said, based in Helsinki in Finland. And looking forward to talking about Business Object Private Cloud Edition. I mean, Business Objects has always been a very much close to my heart because I've joined from Business Objects in 2008, and previously I used to work for Crystal Decisions, so I came from that background. Over to you, Patrick.
All right, great, thanks, Chris. So hello everyone, Patrick Sims, Global COE for Analytics. Also, like Chris, came from the Business Objects side of the house, and I think you all know how much I love Business Objects, and so I'm really pleased. As Bruno was saying, I think this is a great way for Business Objects to still have a fantastic impact. And we're going to start with me kind of telling you the what it is, and then Chris is going to get into the details of the solution itself, most of which, I think most of you would know. The usual disclaimer, anything we talk about from a futures or roadmap standpoint, try not to base your decisions on that because it's not a commitment. It's just it's where we're going, from notional standpoint. All right, so why Private Cloud Edition, right? What is it? So it is a cloud option for you to deploy BusinessObjects Enterprise. It gives you one price and one contract, which I think many of you, especially as we've done our pricing changes through the years, that alone might start to appeal to you. But what is included with it? Well, you've got all of your licenses, right? And it's based on a subscription licensing model, so that works. Infrastructure, so all of the cloud infrastructure and services to deploy this for you and deliver it to you and your customers. And from an operational standpoint, we have proactive managed services that are operating this thing for you. So, I mean, it truly is a cloud option in the sense that we are running the data center for you. We are taking care of the care and feeding. We are doing all of that. It's your content, your development, your intellectual capital for the things that matter, the actual delivery of what you are trying to put out from an analytics standpoint. And then we have optional additional offerings as well in terms of implementation, onboarding, and any customer enhancements that you may see fit to look at. So that's kind of a nutshell, right? So it's take all of the pain of your current deployments of the care and feeding and the, oh my gosh, do we have to upgrade our hardware? What's going on? What's the release cycle? Take all of that away, put it on one contract with one price for the subscription and the t-shirts, and we'll go from there. It's fantastic. So what else is cool? Well, one of the more frequent things that I get as a request is, hey, Patrick, do you have best practices on A, B, or C? Well, this whole package is based on best practices, and so it's not even something you would need to worry about anymore because you wouldn't have to care about some of the best practices in terms of hardware sizing, all those kinds of things, right? So it's developed in conjunction with product development, right, and engineering and ops. So who has the most experience with the tool? Who puts it through its paces, right? Those guys. It's also designed essentially to be future-proof as much as we can. We're not Nostradamus, but whatever we can do in terms of making sure that the environment that we're deploying it on is in sync with our own roadmap standards in terms of where we know we're going with the product. It's also from a mechanical standpoint, architecture principles. We are true to whatever we think is the best, right? Because this is engineered to assure that you are up as 99.9% as you possibly can, so maximum uptime. It's also then globally consistent. So, I'm sure for those of you who have had trouble with support, one of the biggest problems is trying to figure out not really perhaps what's wrong with the tool. It's the getting to what are you on, what version, what service pack, etc. All of that goes away, right? Because every PCE cloud deal is has all of these standards that are enforced and validated in the model that we deliver. Another nice thing for you is that you get the release that's been engineered for you, right? In terms of adoption, when new releases come out, the old test dev cycles can sort of be minimized. I know a lot of that is not always on the software, but more your own internal processes, especially government folks. But hopefully this helps with that so that we know that when we're deploying it in your cloud, that it's been tested and production ready. And hopefully there's a process that you can come up with that's much more streamlined to make sure that that newest version gets out to your folks. And it's an agile platform as well. So it is multi-cloud, as Bruno referenced already. So the reference architecture that we're talking about adopts the application best practices across those different clouds. All right, what are some benefits then for you, right? So number one, it's the only multi-cloud enterprise platform in the market from a BI standpoint. Infrastructure matches requirements, which is really always one of the bigger problems with licensing, right? So from a user standpoint, it's based on subscription models. So the users you need get the subscription. And from a sizing standpoint, we deliver it on t-shirt sizes, right? A concept that we came up with HANA. And so that correlates to the bulk and the impact you'll be putting on the system. So it really logically makes more sense in the end, I think. Another nice thing for you is that the service level agreement that we have for this private cloud edition of BusinessObjects actually applies to any other SAP private cloud edition solution that you might look into, for example, BW4 or others. So once you adopt this service level agreement, it carries through to any other PCE that you'd be interested in. You do have a dedicated system landscape, right? And that will include annual upgrades and patching. It's all designed to make sure, though, that if things aren't meeting your needs, that we can deal with it, those mission critical requirements. And you will have a cloud delivery manager who is your one throat to choke, as we might say in the US, for the individual communications and support that you might need for those mission critical problems or things that you want to try to enhance. So in the end, of course, you're not doing the care and feeding. You're not worried about hardware. So obviously you're getting your low total cost of ownership and the time to value on the tool set that you have been deploying and getting value out of, the preeminent BI on-premise tool set of the world, right? So you also get nice business continuity. If Bruno goes out tomorrow and gets hit by a bus and he was the guy who did all the server caring and feeding, then you don't have to worry about that. You can just go to visit him in the hospital. And you do have your open choice of providers and data centers, as Bruno mentioned, right? So Amazon, Microsoft, and Google right now. And so that's pretty much it in a nutshell in terms of the, what broadly it is, why you might want to look at it, and what are the benefits. Now, Chris is going to go into more of the specifics of the product and what comes with it.
Sure. So, thanks, Patrick. Just share my presentation here.
Patrick, the bus won't happen because I've got my sunglasses. So
of course,
you can see my presentation now.
Perfect.
Okay, great. So one of the questions I often get asked is so what is included in BusinessObjects Private Cloud Edition? And the answer is fairly simple. It's the same full stack of business objects that you have today running in on-premise. So you have all the different BI client tools available to you in BusinessObjects Enterprise, and we deliver it in the latest version of BusinessObjects 4.3 Service Pack 1. So that includes for operational interactive reporting, web intelligence that you're familiar with, and also supporting the universes. So if you have universes and web intelligence reports today running in on-premise, you can migrate those over, and I think we'll talk a little bit later on about the migration. So you can migrate all your content over to the BusinessObjects Private Cloud Edition. We also support Lumira Designer as the analytic application familiar to many of the BW customers. But these are areas that you can also look to evaluate that maybe we could move some of the use cases into the public cloud, whereas SAP Analytics Cloud as an alternative for Lumira Designer, for example. Then we have the Excel add-on with analysis for Office capabilities. One slight thing that to consider is that with the analysis for Office, if you have requirements to schedule analysis for Office documents, that may require a little bit of tweaking of the infrastructure because it's only supported on a Windows platform. But we deliver the whole stack on Linux operating system in Private Cloud Edition. So what that means is that all the servers, all the application servers, everything runs on a Linux platform. And with some components in the BI platform require Windows. And for example, if you are using Crystal Classic today, which is still supported on Linux, it will be the Crystal Classic will be phased out on Linux end of the year with Service Pack 2, which is documented in our statement of direction. We will be having an option for a Windows server also to support our Crystal Classic customers in the Private Cloud Edition. So this is really the benefit of that PCE is that if the roadmap, if there are changes in that, we will try and architect it the best way for our customers to stay on the latest updates on that. So, and by the way, one comment on the statement of direction. Just look out for some news on that. Either end of this week or beginning of early next week, we will be releasing a new statement of direction. This still has the older links from February, but we'll have a new updated version soon available online. Patrick talked about the different T-shirt sizes. So we have actually 4 different T-shirt sizes for private cloud edition: small, medium, large, and extra large. On the right-hand side, you'll see what type of user ranges they cater for and what are the configurations inside those different T-shirt configurations. So it goes from a small environment with one server with 16 cores on an app server, 64 gigabytes of RAM. All of the environments, all of the configurations include a Lumira server, and all the way up to the XL or the extra large application server with 4 32-core app servers, 128 gigabytes of RAM. So really beefy servers to run business objects on. All of the PCE deployments include 2 tiers. So you have a dev QA landscape and a production landscape. The dev QA landscape is smaller in all cases, so it consists of one application server and one Lumira server. But don't be afraid, there is an option to add more non-production landscapes. So we have available now for additional non-productive tiers. So if you're used to running a 3-tier or a 4-tier landscape, you can add more tiers into the configuration. We operate on a ASC database, so the CMS runs on an ASC database that we manage, upgrade, and host in the configuration. And like Patrick said, we take care of all the infrastructure, the enterprise support, and some proactive application management services on top of that. And I'll talk about that a little bit later on. And finally, I mean, we include yearly upgrades, so major upgrades, for example, service pack, and also smaller minor updates like patching and critical fixes if needed into the infrastructure or into the app software. It's really designed around also supporting customer security requirements. So we do use the HTTPS protocol. We have SSL endpoints to our load balancers, and also secured access. So everything is around the whole built upon the SAP security framework around our enterprise cloud. And then for client tools access, client tools can access through the customer network. So all the desktops will be able to then have their access through the from the desktop into the private network where the private cloud edition is hosted on. A little bit about the support and services. So the support scope, here you see a comparison between on-premise infrastructure as a service or running PCE business objects. So SAP as the service provider takes care of the whole technical infrastructure management and setup from server, storage, hardware, up to the standard technical management services, which include platform database management, virtualization, and then a part of the additional technical services required for application management. I would say the operating system level is taking care of all the way from SAP, and then on top of that you have the application management. So this could be done by the customer or by a partner that takes care of the more application operational management tasks in the CMC, for example, or doing the testing or the configuration. So all that access is available then to the user. And some of the services that we include here for PCE, I've just highlighted a few here. So included are some of the standard technical services. So the backups, the running the repository diagnostic tool, deploying settings on a reverse proxy settings, or doing any system configuration changes, version management. These are all included in the package. And then you have what we call optional cloud application services, CAS. So these CAS services are something that you can then order from SAP as additional services if needed, or the customer or the partner can do these settings themselves. So setting up, for example, SAML configuration, or setting up some of the process or server groups inside business objects. These are tasks that can be done by the SAP or can be then done by customers or partners. So just want to finish off with a summary on what Patrick started on. What is Business Objects Private Cloud Edition all about? We have the one contract, the standard package, which includes licenses, infrastructure, and operations. Then additionally, you have some optional things that you can add on to the offering. So, for example, if there's a requirement for additional storage or additional application servers in the landscape, these are available. And also, disaster recovery is an option that we have available that will copy and replicate the repository database or the FRS to a secondary region. And then, like I mentioned, some non-production deployments for if the current 2-tier deployment is not enough, so you can add also more non-productive deployments. Thank you. Let's go to questions then.
So, Chris, before we go through the questions, I had a couple of questions for you first and for Patrick,
Sure.
And then we'll take 3-4 questions. So the first thing is, everybody wants to know around costs. So I've got, a lot of people have got licenses that are CPU or named and concurrent.
Yeah.
What does that mean when you go to PC? Are you guys going to convert them or not? And are they going to be converted to named user licenses?
Yeah. So the licensing model that for Private Cloud Edition is the same licensing model you have today for the latest model in the on-premise world. So we have named users and we have concurrent sessions. Now, and these are based on a subscription basis, so on a monthly cost. Now, if you are on a older model like a CPU model, then we have this thing called a cloud conversion, that we can convert the existing maintenance that you have today into the cloud, into the subscription for PCE.
But okay, so I understand you're going to go from a perpetual model to subscription, which makes a lot of sense for the cloud model. But one thing, I just want to get some clarification. So if today you have named and concurrent licenses on the cloud, you will keep the name and the concurrent licenses, or is
Correct.
it going to be named?
It will be named and concurrent are offered both on the cloud on a subscription license.
Okay, understood. So you'll be converting that, with the traditional rules, I'm assuming.
Yeah,
correct.
Which are perfectly fine. Then the second question around that is, okay, there are actually a lot of customers that are left with CPU licenses. So what will you be doing on that? Is there like a path saying typically X CPU is equals to X name users or concurrent users, or what's the play on that? Or that's still TBD, and which is all fine.
Patrick, do you want to take this one?
I think it's still evolving to some extent. We do have some general rules of thumb and best practices, as you note, Bruno, for X CPU, for X concurrency, but we can also look at your actual system itself and check the auditing out and see what your actual real concurrent usership is of that.
Okay.
And the other good thing too, right, is that, the joy of CPU in the early days was that you can throw as much hardware as you need to perform, right? All that goes away now, right? You deal with just your concurrent usership on a lower cost per month model, and we take care of all that performance and hardware for you.
Yeah, definitely. And I see another option there is like we've done with you guys actually a couple of scans. And the good thing there is we're actually able to understand how many sessions, how many users you need to be
Right.
licensed on. So that will give you some more insights just to make sure that it's cost right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that, So I think that's something. Okay, that was the first part. So it's subscription. If you got CPU, you'll need to convert these to named user licenses or concurrent, whatever it is. If you've got named and concurrent, basically it doesn't matter. You're just going to subscription.
Right.
So that's the first part. The second part, just to confirm, is you'll need to be on Linux. So when you go on PC, so that's correct.
Yeah, that's correct. So PC is Linux based.
And which basically means for people that want to go on PCE that are on Windows, they will need to be doing that conversion before going to PCE.
Not necessarily. I mean, they can migrate over to the directly from the Windows and deployments into PC on Linux. Just have to be cautious that they might have to change some of the driver types that they have using today from ODBC to JDBC. But these are typical things that we manage with customers when they go to PCE.
And the reason I'm asking all these questions is we've actually, the past month or so, I think we've helped probably 5 customers go to PCE. And these are all the questions that a lot of people, that they all have the same questions. We see good traction, but people need some clarification. So, but people will need to go to Linux. And additionally, PC today for new customers or existing customers going to PC, does that mean that they need to go to 4.3 or they're going to 4.2, let's say SP9? The existing
so BusinessObjects PCE is deployed on 4.3 Service Pack 1. So, but you can migrate from your existing 4.2 Service Pack 8 or 9 or previous versions directly into PCE. So you can go directly that route and migrate.
And in terms of Crystal, so I know you had some comments, and I also see some questions in the chat box. In terms of Crystal, so you were saying there could be like a Windows machine?
Yeah, so this is part of the planning for the upcoming Service Pack 2. So Crystal Classic, so Crystal Reports Classic is going to be only supported on Windows after Service Pack 2. So we will be doing some adjustments, adding a Windows capability into the landscapes to support our Crystal Classic customers.
Okay, and 4.2 is also out of the end of the year. That was the latest input from
So probably around the first half of next year, we'll see SP2 in the PCE landscape.
Okay, very good. Another question is on old BobJ deployments. Sometimes over the years, people have got multiple contracts, and multiple deployments, etc. So it makes things a little bit tricky. When people will be going to PC and they will be going for the subscription model, are you guys going to offer them the possibility to consolidate all these licenses? Is that the route, or is this something too complicated? And I know it can be tricky in terms of contracts.
I think that's the preferred route. Is really that's the end game goal. Is that you on your side, customer, are more managed down to a one contract, one price kind of scheme. So, yes, there are still complexities to deal with in each individual case, as you know, Bruno. But yeah, that is the end game goal.
And then
this is Bruno. This is really an opportunity to also to simplify all those existing contracts and also look at the usage of the BusinessObjects platform and right size it.
Yeah, I agree, and that's something that we'll cover after, because it's over the years. I mean, we'll talk about the percentages, but just always amazing to see all the unused licenses, all the unused content. There's so many things that can be done to make things more efficient. And I think it's a very good time, in fact, to do that. In fact, the T-shirt size, I recall there were discussions last year, and I think you guys have worked some more later or not that long ago around the sizes. And I can say they're a lot better suited to deployments. I think most of your work, Chris, if I follow on that. So.
Yeah, and still, I mean, customers have the flexibility of configuring the system based on their usage. So you can tune the system, the configuration based on your usage. If you have more usage on web intelligence, for example, you might want to increase that performance and configuration on web intelligence. So it still gives you that flexibility
in terms of upgrades, so to my understanding, what happens right now is SAP will handle all the patches. So let's say there's a new patch that's out, there's a new version of BobJ, you guys will take care of the update, which is kind of cool. And in terms of the daily work on the BobJ platform, that will remain to be done by the customer or some other providers.
Right.
Is that correct?
Right. That's correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
And in terms of backup, so you were talking about the DR, and that's cool. Where of course, your customer should be going for 2 sites. That's something that we can only recommend.
Right.
It's a good practice. And my understanding is, I think like the DR is done like every 30 minutes, if I recall. Is that correct? Or
I would have to check. Yeah, I would have to check how the DR is set up.
Which I think is a typical, anyway, cloud infrastructure where it acts like a VM or so. So let's take a few questions we've got before we move on to the part where Keith Johnson is going to discuss around DOJ. So we've got a few questions, and then we'll take all the other questions. There are a lot of questions. So there is a question from Brian. So Brian is saying, why ASC database? We had some issues on this database, and the answer is that these problems are only with ASC. Where is analysis for OLAP? So these are some questions from Brian.
Yeah, so we have SAP has probably two databases that we run. The repository one would be HANA, which of course for a repository would be a little bit over engineering it, and so ASC is our preferred choice for having, and the system repository is all managed by us. So I don't see that, or we have not had any issues that we've seen on running ASC in our cloud environment.
And I'd say even back from the old BobJ days, the developers always liked starting with Linux first, right, in ASC.
Yeah. So. Yeah, and the other one was regarding analysis for OLAP. Yeah, it is. It was not mentioned there in the solution, but yes, definitely it's included in 4.3 Service Pack 1.
Okay, another question from let's say I think Brian was actually based in Denmark. And then we got Mark, who's based in U.S. No, I'm just kidding. Mark Richardson is actually based in Canada, of course. What level of audit access do tenant admins get to BusinessObject PCE audit data for compliance purposes? Do you have any answer on that? And if you guys don't, I'm sure we can get back to.
I'm not sure. I would assume that audit will be turned on, though, which some of these people don't do in the first place, right? So,
yeah.
But yeah, we can check on that.
Yeah, definitely. You always want to have your audit on. Right?
Right.
Yeah. And I know it can cause a lot of issues around, performance, etc.
Yeah.
It's actually it's.
Well, you will still have the classic access to your audit database through the universes and the reports, but on a database level, like going into the database, and you that's something we will not be able to provide. It's going to be basically on the reporting level and universe level to access that database.
Yeah.
And then
that's actually, but while we're there, Bruno, that's a good point, right? So, and also to the analysis OLAP question, it is BusinessObjects 4.3 as it exists today for the most part. You're just not having to deal with the plumbing. Think of it that way, right? You're dealing with your any sort of admin console type things you would do on the front end. You're just not really under there tinkering with the database and that kind of thing. It's really, from a tool standpoint, it's everything. From a, admin standpoint, you have access to everything you normally have access to. You're just not having to do some of that underlying care and feeding.
Okay.
If that helps clarify.
And, again, if it hasn't, please feel free to put, the questions and Actually, we've got Chris who's behind. I think he's copying all the questions right now. There was a little technical hiccup at first where I think he couldn't copy everything, but feel free to put them in, and we'll share these with Patrick, Gregory, and Chris afterwards to get all the answers and get back to you. So, additionally, in terms of, we've got another question from Chris. What about the client tools? Are those installed internally on client machines, or are you providing VMs for client tools as well?
Yeah, we don't provide VMs by default. We have the option of providing Windows machines, infrastructure as service, kind of like empty Windows servers, which would be then available for customers to install the client tools. But do you really need them? I mean, if you can access the your client tools can access through the private network into the business objects landscape. So it is possible. Yes, we do have them that option, but it's not by default that we provide them.
And we've got one last question before we go to the next part of the event from Kim. Okay, servers, how does a PCE stay current with my organization's compliance requirements? Java version, security patches, etc. And I've seen actually multiple questions around that topic. So I guess that's something pretty important for all the audience, because they all think, okay, how's it going to work with security and compliance?
I can answer. I mean,
yeah,
we follow the SAP security framework,
right.
which follows a lot of the different certificates that we have for ISO and things like that. So we have, and we wanted to, of course, keep those versions up to date as much as possible. So depends on what kind of compliance requirements they are, but I think for most parts we try and address them to be on the latest version.
Yeah. And also think about 4.3. We're trying to minimize Java as much as we can, so that's one that can go away nicely, right?
Yeah, that's a good one. And definitely, being on the latest in terms of security is always an advantage. Yep. There can be sometimes some disadvantages, but the good thing is you guys are managing the upgrades, and
right.
And I can be sure there. And
yeah, and there's very and there's a very good guideline document online. I can maybe share, Bruno, later on that for security on our enterprise cloud, how it's managed.
Yep.
Okay, very good. Okay, let's move on, and then we'll take all the other questions afterwards at the end. There are a lot of questions. I'm not sure we can cover everything. I'm sorry about that, but definitely if we haven't been able to, all these questions, except the first few ones, are being copied right now. And we'll be sharing these with with Patrick, Chris, and Gregory to provide you answers. So, okay, we've got the famous KJ from DC. KJ,
hey, gentlemen, how are we doing this morning?
The most famous KJ from DC, I should say. So, KJ, the reason we actually had you on is, okay, you know a little bit about BobJ, I guess. It's same as Patrick, same as Chris. And I think you've done that just for the past 6 months, I guess. Just kidding.
You can see all the black and blue marks, right?
Yeah. And the reason I was wanting to have you on was, outside of the Talk to the Expert, is that talking to you recently is we have a common 360 CB on data customer. That's actually where you're involved on a project taking him to the AWS GovCloud. So can you just share just a few things of what you're doing to go there and any recommendations?
Sure. So in the federal sector, the SAP PCE service is a fairly new option to leverage, right? We are in the process of deploying an SAP-based financial reporting and analytics solution for a Department of Justice component. This solution leverages a number of SAP technologies. So I know you guys are really focused in on BobJ this morning. Our solution includes data services, information steward, BPC, BW for HANA, and obviously a HANA database in support of this. And all of this also leverages a number of AWS GovCloud services as well. So the only thing I think we're missing is the kitchen sink in terms of this. So we decided to leverage essentially a 3-tier SAP PCE solution, large T-shirt size, if you're interested. And then, for us, it's really to focus in on what we know best. So our customers' needs, focus in on that solution delivery, content, and data, and leave the management of the SAP infrastructure up to SAP. The one sort of twist into this is because we're also leveraging some of the AWS services. We've got a little bit of a kind of a twist to the architecture, if you were to say that. Let me go to the next slide here. So this is just sort of a very high level kind of solution diagram within the GovCloud, how we're addressing this. So we have our customer VPC or environment at the bottom, and it's connected to SAP PCE VPC, so virtual private cloud, via something called a transit gateway or AWS transit gateway. And then we have in our own AWS services VPC, we're running a number of the AWS technologies, DMS and Glue, S3 for storage, GB & Smith 360 Suite for reporting and management. And we're leveraging AWS's VPC peering to sort of combine or merge those private clouds into a single tier. So what you're looking at would be sort of equivalent to, maybe we call it our production environment, right? So we have both components peered together to form an overall solution. All right. And then you can see on the PCE side, we've got our business objects, our data services, information steward, BPC and BW for HANA technologies, along with SAP HANA, which is our data warehouse. All right. Any questions?
By the way, just for the audiences, I think Chris and Patrick, they will come back after. It's just that we don't want to have all the videos to be too crowded, for the event. And, it's quite interesting on your case here because it's like a real life experience, and you see the customer like with data services and, all these things that you see on the real life. So it's quite an interesting project. And Keith, in terms of length of the project, like, how long do you expect the whole project will take? What's your guess?
So for us, there's a couple in more nuts and bolts than your sort of standard business objects environment. So we're probably currently looking at somewhere between the 4 to 6 month range for full deployment, stand up testing, before we really go live within the environment. So still not too bad when you're looking at the size of the project. But it definitely, leveraging the PCE service definitely removes more stuff from our plate from an infrastructure kind of perspective. So we can focus in on the solution and testing to ensure everything is solid for the customer.
And what was the primary reason? What was the primary reason for the customer to go to PC versus going to AWS, itself? Why did they really? What was the reason behind the scene on that? It was
so remember, so the AWS is still our foundation, right? So this is all running on AWS. So AWS hasn't moved out of the picture, but really, again, in terms of leveraging the PCE service, it's really to take that infrastructure management out of the equation for us, and really just concentrate on the customer components.
Okay, now I'm assuming there for them to be choosing PC specifically in this case, I guess there were some cost reasons behind the scene.
I believe that there was, yes.
I think that's what I recall anyway, with discussing with you and the customer on that. I see a few questions, but I think what we'll do is we'll just take all the questions at the end where we'll have, because they're a little bit mixed between what you've presented and also what Patrick and also what Chris have presented. So I think let's move on and then let's do a longer Q&A at the end. Let's reshuffle a little bit things. Hey,
Sounds
Pauline, how's it going? We don't hear you. I think your mic isn't on. I mean, it's.
Hi, I'll just use my hand. Hi, everybody.
Thanks a lot for joining. So Pauline is one of my co-workers, and then we'll be presenting, how 360 Suite is going to help you go to PCE and manage PCE. Also, a little story between Pauline and I is that typically our kids always watch these events afterwards on YouTube. And each time, it's over, I know my daughter will be on and say, hey, Dad, oh, I didn't like your joke today about your glasses or whatever. And whatever. I get always, always these comments. And I think your daughter, if I recall, also is going to check things. So we can say we're YouTube
Stars
or something like that in our little world, which probably they don't care about, which I get. So Pauline, let's get things started with 360 on that. So over the years, in terms of 360, we've done, frankly, like thousands of migrations. I'm sure actually with Keith, we've probably done maybe 50 to 100. I'm sure we've done that type of number together. But overall, we've done over 1,000 migrations over the years. With customers using 360. And over the years, we put together like a methodology on how to help customers go to a new version, upgrade, go to the cloud. And here we try to put together all the knowledge that we've had over the years on how to go to PCE and how to do it, the fastest way, the most efficient way at the cheapest cost. So Pauline, if you can show your screen. So right now I don't see the presentation yet behind. So essentially while the screen is showing is overall, we've put together like a 3-step methodology. Okay, here's the presentation that pays on. So that's on. So it's a 3-step methodology that's based on, the 10 steps that we've been presenting for many years, but we tried to strip it down for today. So the first thing is, on the first step is, you're going on the cloud. So you've heard us for years saying, and clean up your environment, archive whatever you're not using. By the way, I'd be curious to get some feedback from the audience in terms of, number one, what version of BusinessObjects you guys are on. And number two, and as well if you're on Linux or Windows, and then number two, what's the percentage of documents that has not been used, in the past 13 months, if you guys know. So what's critical here when you go to the cloud is it's a t-shirt size. So sometimes you can argue, hey, should I do my cleanup before or after the migration? That's always a good question. And I would say I prefer to do things before, but we can argue on that. But there, in terms of going to the cloud, no argument, just do it before. Okay, because you'll pay versus what you're moving to the cloud at the end of the day. And don't forget that PCE is really a t-shirt base size. And therefore, don't pay for what you're not going to be using. So do the cleanup before. And if you don't want to delete things, which is the case for most deployments, is 360 is going to help you to archive things and show you how to find what's not used. The second part that we'll talk around is it's always tricky. We've actually seen that with another federal customer. It was funny since Keith was on, it can be very tricky for customers to move their content to the cloud. It's not that easy, or in some cases it can be very difficult. And here we're going to talk to you around how to move the content and then what to do once you move the content around testing, whether it's performance or regression testing. And the last part is once you're on the cloud, okay, great. Their SAP now is going to take care of all the patches, the upgrades, which is cool. But at the end of the day, all the day-to-day work, testing, administration, etc., or regulatory work will be done by you. And that hasn't changed. So, Pauline, in terms of the first step, can you show us, in 360, what that looks like? What can we do there to help the customer? So the first thing is around usage, if I understand.
Right. So yeah, like you said, you only want to pay for what you use. So it makes sense to do some cleanup prior to moving to the cloud. So this is a report from 360 Suite that combines all the information from the CMS, from the auditor, and the file store, and gives you a full picture about what's being used and what's not being used. So if you only use auditor, you'll get a sense of what reports are most frequently used, what's been run in the past year. But anything that hasn't been run, it's never going to show up on an auditing report. So this will give you that full report, and a lot of our customers will take this and say, okay, anything that hasn't been run in 2 years, I'm gonna remove, which is kind of a good rule of thumb. Duplicate reports, you find reports in public folders get copied. A lot of times users just want to run them from their personal folders, so they get copied. And then you find that you have copies all over the place of the same report. So with 360 Suite, you can identify those copies, pare it down so that you're not moving, 20 copies of the same report, and just let the users know they can be, where they can be found. So using this MD5 key, which is literally like a fingerprint of your Webby reports, it'll identify the copies.
It's like funny. I think last week we were talking with an insurance company, and we found out running some of these reports with them, and they thought there was an error where like one of their documents had been copied over 100 times. So that was kind of funny. And believe it or not, these are things that we see on a regular basis. So it's very important to see that. And it's a good way and a cheap way just to reduce the migration scope. It's when you do that type of work is you want to know what you've got. It's like if you move your house, you want to know, what I haven't been using in the past years, and I don't want to be. It's the same going to the cloud. So, but you need to have the data. And there, it's not like when we did our move with my wife, it's always, we always have arguments. Hey, Bruno, did we ever use this? Or yes, no, we always have these arguments. And here you've got the single vision, the single version of truth. What has been used in the past 13 months. And typically 13 months is the right rule, because if you haven't used them in the past 13 months, the odds are you won't need them again. Or you can always archive them. And if you need them, just get them back. And then in terms of licenses, so as Chris and Patrick are saying, you've got the option here to convert to subscription, which is really cool. The important thing is what we've seen over the years is, there's a lot of unused licenses. So it can actually be a good time to convert some of these, for example, to go to SAC if you want to. Or work something out with SAP on that. So find out what licenses have been used. Typically, you'll take the 6 months. That's typically the rule that we would use, and it's not unusual to see a good 30% of licenses that are not being used. So it's something that we definitely recommend doing, and it's easy and it's very cost efficient. So it's a good way to reduce your costs. So.
Right. And another thing is consolidating schedules. So if you have a lot of schedules, being able to maybe consolidate, if you find the same documents being scheduled 20 times a day, to reduce your costs once you're in the cloud, you can consolidate those so that report only runs once a day. Maybe you publish it to SharePoint. Maybe it's saved in a public folder so that it can be accessed by those 20 or 30 users that need that. So rather than pushing it out 20 times to an email inbox. So documenting that and kind of figuring out where you can consolidate schedules is helpful as well.
Pauline, can you show us in 360, how actually to do archive, clean inboxes? How does it work in 360?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So one of the content that probably takes the most amount of time to migrate is the instances, and a lot of customers have requirements to keep those instances. So you may not want to get rid of them, but maybe not want them to stay in the CMS. So with 360, you have the ability to actually archive them. So here's an archive instance option where you can either identify, okay, this is my list of instances, or you can just do all of them, and you specify an archive location. So it can be a network share location. You can say, okay, archive any instances older than a certain number of days. So maybe, everything that's older than 120 days, I'm going to archive, and then remove them. So they're out of the CMS, but they're, accessible. You can include these dynamic parameters that will allow you to easily find them. So it'll include the title, you can include the date, the owner, and the structure of the report. So it'll be exactly the same structure when they get moved over, and we can archive all formats. So Webby, whether they're PDFs, Excel, whatever the format is, those can be archived. And this is a huge time saver because those schedules, those instances, tend to be huge. They have data in them. So that's typically what we find with customers, moving to the cloud or moving to another platform. The instances, take up a lot of the space and time to move the content. And also being able to clean out inboxes is helpful. Yeah, so you can do it based on the how old they are, or by the number. If you want to tell your users they can only keep 10 at a time. You can clean inboxes older than a certain date. And the nice thing is going forward, you can also keep this turned on as well.
And this step is very important. Like what we've seen over the years is there is a good 60% of content that hasn't been used in the past 13 months. That's something that we see pretty frequently. I see Kim, I think, saying it was like 25% for her. I see also Brian, who was referring, I think, to 40%. Over the years, talking to customers, we've typically seen it's a good 60%. In fact, when we work with customers, I always have this story where we always bet drinks on who's going to win around what's the percentage content that hasn't been used in the past 13 months. And people in general, they say 10, 20%. And I end up winning most of the time because I give larger numbers, and most of the time I'm accurate. So on that. Now, okay, Pauline, once you've done all your cleanup, once you've archived things, before going to the cloud, and again, this is extremely important if you go to PC, just to make sure that you go to the right t-shirt size. And also, by the way, with 360, you're able to do some assessments to understand, okay, what size do I really need? So that's another very important point that 360 is going to help you on, because you've got to find the right t-shirt size, but you've got to base things on facts. So on the second part it's going to be around going to the cloud and testing, whether it's regression testing or refresh of your Webbies, because that's always a tricky point.
Right. So the first challenge is getting that content migrated. So all of your reports, all your users, all your folders, universes, everything moved to the cloud. So with 360 Suite, you have the ability to move your content CMS to CMS. So you can, if you do have connectivity, I know with Keith, they're going to do, with the DOJ migration, they're going to do CMS to, I believe it's FTP site. So if you don't have that direct connectivity, or you're unsure that maybe the network may not be as fast as you would like, so you can do CMS to file system, FTP, and then from the cloud, then you can import all that content. And this is all the content that you can move, so all your access levels, all your groups, your users, and everything gets, the benefit of using 360 is everything gets moved in the correct order. So if you're going to use, if you use maybe the promotion management in the CMC, you would need to do things in a certain order, get your access levels over first, then your user groups, and then move the content, so that once the content's moved, the appropriate security is applied. Whereas with 360, you can do it all together, and it will be moved in the appropriate order so that the correct security is applied.
And polling in terms of moving content with 360. So, typically there is a question that we hear all the time is, why the hell should I be using 360 to move the content to the cloud? What's the advantage of doing that?
You can do it all in one migration task, whereas with the promotion management tool, any customers we had a small federal customer that they were moving to Azure just on their own Azure site, and they tried to use the promotion management tool, and they really didn't have that much content, and they couldn't get it to run because they needed to allocate so much memory. So they used 360. It ran, and it was about an hour getting everything moved over, and they were really happy about that. But yeah, there's just if you've got any amount of content, it's probably going to require you to do a lot of promotion tasks one after the other. A lot of customers have issues with their instances moving over. So, in those scenarios, but with 360, we've had customers large and small have success using our promotion tool.
If I recall, actually in 4.2, it's funny, we've got a very large oil and gas company in Holland, and not to mention any name, and they had some bunch of issues moving their content for migration. And the only way they could do it was actually to use 4.2 or to use 360. So that was for their 4.2 environment. So they had actually tried to do things, the regular way, and they were just simply not successful with that. Pauline, in terms I see on this slide, so very often when you do that type of work, the big issue is people want to know, well, has everything been moved to the cloud? What has been changed, modified, deleted?
Yeah, so you can, with the promotion task that runs in 360, you can get a whole inventory of what was moved. That status column will tell you whether it was promoted or not. So, if there are any failures, you'll see those listed. If something didn't get moved, you can do a comparison between the two as well. So there's some reports that will allow you to look at two different CMSs and compare, okay, are all my users there? Are any users missing? Let's see, we look at, so comparing users. So this would allow you to say, okay, select a snapshot from the PCE environment, select a snapshot from your on-prem environment, and what are the differences. So here you see on the left-hand side, these users exist in the PCE environment, but not in the in the on-prem environment. And then on the right, this is the only one that exists on the on-prem. So maybe it needs to be migrated. Maybe it got added after the fact. So if you need to, get things in sync, because typically there's some time involved before you, finally go to, switch to the new environment. So that allows you to do the comparisons. You can do it with your Webby documents, folders, groups, just to ensure that everything got migrated correctly.
Okay. Hey, Pauline, by the way, we hear a little bit of your mic scratching.
Oh, okay.
Shirt, which is not
okay. Sorry.
No. That's all fine. And additionally, 360 will provide you, it's going to tell you, what content leveraging the metadata has been modified, created, or deleted, because all these projects, they tend to take time, and you want to do an assessment of what objects have moved during the process. So that's something that 360 will do very well. And the reason why we're talking about documentation is, it's cover yourself. Is you do that type of work, you want to make sure that if there is something that happened, that you've moved all the content, that you've got proof to say it has been moved, everything has been moved. And the same when you do archiving, it's for the step before, is you want to prove that whatever you've archived, where it is, that you've got all the documentation to support that, because it's always nice to be able to do that. But at the end is, if there is anything wrong, you need to be able to prove that it has been done. It has been done properly. So.
Okay. And then the most important step is making sure everything is still working as expected. So most of the time when you go to PC that's on 4.3, you're probably also doing an upgrade, right? So a lot of you will be on 4.2 maybe, and this will be an upgrade. So being able to, compare, what's changed. Are my reports still giving the same results? What does performance look like? So 360 will allow you to do that. So this is just an example. So left-hand side would be the on-prem version, and right-hand side is the 4.3 PCE version. And anywhere there are differences will be highlighted in that orange color. In this case, it's just the title changed. But yeah, you'd be able to see, run through all the pages of the document, so no other differences there. Here's just an example of one. So again, it'll just highlight any differences. So it looks like there's something changed with the revenue column, or maybe it's a variable, maybe it's a universe object, and so then you can take a look into that and see what might have changed. The performance as well. So that'll highlight. You can check the execution time. So on the left, it was 12 seconds. On the right, it was 4 seconds. So this would allow you to, set expectations. Are we getting similar performance? Is it better? Is it worse? And just to know what to expect.
And pulling to that point, that's always the $1 million question, because we've seen so many deployments over the year that had migrations that have failed because of the performance issue. Where, for example, let's say on the left, it's, let's say, on-prem. On the right, it is, on cloud.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens very often is, it's like it's an IT migration, it's technical migration. Like the business, they don't really care if you're going to the cloud or not. They just want to make sure that, things are running as they were before. And actually, I can tell you, they all think, well, it's going to go to the cloud, and you know what? It's got to be rocket fast. That's typically the expectation. And, the reality is not always that simple. And there are a lot of factors around that. And the big problem in this case is to say, well, you've got your business, calling you saying, you know what, Bruno, my Webby now is taking twice as long, 3 times as long. And at the end is, you have no clue if he's correct or not. And the only way to really know that is basically to be leveraging Bind, to be running tests on-prem and on the cloud, and also got ways to monitor the scheduling performances over time. So that's pretty nice. And the other advantage of using tools like Bind is that when you do migrations, there are always things that will shift. It's like a box of chocolate. You get, it always looks good. And at the end, there's always something inside that you didn't expect that doesn't taste good, but you don't know which one it is. So Bind is going to help you to know what will not taste good. And ideally, what you ought to do is you should use actually metadata provided by 360 Eyes to tell you, okay, what are the key Webby documents, for example, that you're using? What are the most popular ones? What are the ones that are running at the end of the quarter that are critical for business reporting? Okay, get this type of information. Pauline, let's say here you find a regression. Okay, let's say, how do you take care of it?
Yeah, so like in this example, revenue is showing some regressions. So you can use the impact analysis reports in 360 Eyes. So, typically our customers will use Eyes to figure out which reports they want to include in their testing. If you have 60,000, 100,000 reports, you're not going to test them all. So you pick a representative sample. And then if you do find issues, you can then, so like in this example, there's impact analysis on variables. You can do impact analysis on your universe objects, on SQL. So we extract all that metadata so that you can then search for, what other reports use that same syntax. So this is looking at equals count. So anywhere that's used, so that I would be able to identify all the reports that use that in the variable. So and I see what the document name, where they're stored, what the path is, so that I know what else is impacted by a regression. And in the cases of variables with 360, you can actually bulk update these variables. So sometimes with customers, I know with 4.1 to 4.2, we had a customer that had 1,300 variables that the syntax changed between the versions. So they were able to use 360 to bulk update all their the variables to use the new syntax. So they were able to and then run through bind, make sure everything was still working as expected, and finish that.
Recently, we actually were talking with a utility company leveraging a 360 suite, and the way that they were testing things is they had to test things by default, where in the past, by the way, they had to do things manually. And it's always the same thing where nobody wants to do the testing because it's not something fun. It's not something that's done well for humans. So you're better off to have a software behind the scene doing things. And what they've actually done is they've leveraged 360 eyes to understand, okay, what's the right content to test, or what's the most critical one. And then when they found some regressions, what they've done is they've used eyes to understand, okay, I know there's an issue. It's this variable. Okay, I know where this variable is used in all these other documents. And because of that, I think they save like it's not 100% time, but it's humongous. It's like 98% of time or so just going through things. And it's actually even greater than that. And that has helped to shrink all their all their migration time, because very often all these migration projects are very limited in terms of time, and people, they want to go quickly for testing, and people sometimes tend to cut corners, and it's not something that you should do. You want to make sure that you test. And by the way, here again is you've got documentation to prove that all the tests were done and they were done properly. So that's very, very important.
And that's another reason to do the cleanup, so that you're not testing documents that no one's run in 3 years, or, duplicate, you have duplicates, 20 duplicates, you're having to update 20 of those to fix issues. Just fix the one.
And again, all that work won't be done by SAP, in the PCE project. And again, the migration itself is something that you have to do, or you have to work with the partner. It's not something that SAP will take care of. So now, Pauline, once you've moved to the cloud, how can 360 help you? Because what we've heard earlier from Chris and Patrick is, okay, SAP will be taking care of all the upgrades, which is actually really cool. It's it's one less pain for a lot of deployments now. At the end, is they will still do the maintenance of their environment, meaning the administration tasks. After there is an upgrade, they will still need to do some testing behind the scene. So how 360 will help in that? And typically what we hear from customers is people tend to say, hey, we save 80% of time on that. So can you give us a couple examples how 360 will help on that?
Yeah, so the first thing is having a backup. So being able to, with 360, we do incremental backup. So backing up all of your content. So every object gets its own backup. So every universe, every report, every instance. And so if you need to restore just, roll back to a previous version of the document, you can do that. You have the ability to restore that. So I'll show you what that looks like. So with the backups, show you what that looks like. So we setting a frequency so you can have it run. Most of our customers just run it daily. First time it runs, it does a full backup, and then the subsequent backups are all incremental. You choose what you want to back up, so all your groups, your users, and then you set the number of backups. You can also back up the personal content and also the instances. And this allows you to, if at any point in time you need to restore something, you can do it very easily. In the instance of, if you have a VM backup it could be, it could still have the issue in that one backup. You might have to go back too far. And then what do you do with, if you go back 3 days or a day, what about all that content that was created in the day? So, with 360, it's very easy. If a user gets removed, maybe something doesn't get synced properly with whatever your SSO provider is. So if I go in here, I can restore. So I go to my backups. I've got 2 backups. I can restore this backup. I can also do a compare to see, okay, what's different. So something is not working. What changed? Did something change in the SQL? Did something change in the variables? So this will highlight, what's different. And so I immediately know, okay, this was added in green here. These 2 objects were added. So that's what's different. Okay, yeah, this is the version I want. And then I can restore that.
And in general, why are people using 360 for their backups, even on the cloud? Is, okay, 360 is incremental. You can restore any object. You can compare them. So when you're going to the cloud, it's great if you're talking around MTD, which is the maximum tolerable downtime, or the RTO, which is the recovery time objective for people that are familiar with these terms. The issue is always the RPO, for example, which is the recovery point objective, is the amount of information that you're going to lose in between your backups. For example, sometimes you've got like copies of your VM like every 30 minutes. So that can be more, that can be less. And if there is actually something that is corrupted, basically your VM will be corrupted as well. So you'll have an issue. And if you need to restore something that has been corrupted, well, your VM is corrupted. So there's nothing that you can do on that. So it's actually quite frequent to be seeing that on the cloud. So we've got numerous customers that are Coop, that are using the continuous of operation plan provided by NIST, that are leveraging 360 suite for that. Another thing around 360 when you're going to the cloud, or if you're going on PCE, for example, is, you want to monitor what's going on the platform. Is how many documents have been created? What are the activity of the users on these documents? Because overall, over the years, your object deployment is growing. I can tell you one thing is it's going to keep on growing if you're on the cloud. So you've done all that work to make it fit in the right t-shirt size. Trust me, you want to make sure it stays in that size. So you want to understand what's going on the platform. And based on data here, you want to, do the archiving. You want to continue to do the cleanup. So it's an effort that you need to keep on going because it's going to cost you money on that. So make sure that you do it and leverage all the metadata around that. And it's the same thing essentially for your licenses. Again, is you want to make sure is all the licenses that have been allocated, just make sure that they're being used. And if not, discuss with SAP, maybe perhaps push them to SAC. I know that can be an option. That's actually pretty cool. And then another point is with when you're going on PCE is, again, it's all a matter of cost. People go to the cloud because they want to have better control of their costs. So typically what we see is a lot of people do chargeback, showback, where people want to know, I want to know which group is using all these documents. How large, are these documents? They want to get all the insights and compare it to the usage, non-usage, and based on that, leverage that information to charge basically, let's say, HR department or whatever department. The other great thing is IT very often is seen as a cost center. And the nice thing here is IT can say, I can actually show the costs of developing all these reports, and I can monitor it based on the usage of all these reports, so that the money that I'm given to be supporting all these documents, I know it's well spent, and I'm going to monitor how it's being spent. And that's going to help you again reduce your budget. And in terms of once you're on the cloud, there are 2 other things. Is one, 360 is going to help you to do all the automation and all the bulk updates. Pauline, any word on that?
Yeah, I mean, so continuously, you don't have to be, running through all of these, checking them, periodically. You can do this on your own. There's a lot of maintenance tasks that can be automated to keep your the space down. You can have them run occurring. Maybe you want it to run once a week at a certain time, or run it every Friday. And one of the a couple, we have several customers that are really good at figuring out what makes the most sense to automate. The purging Webby documents. So this is going to save on space. So if users are saving Webby documents with data in them, obviously that's going to increase the size requirements, space requirements. So you can keep the prompt values. I know, sometimes people do that just to keep the previous values, or you can just purge based on the size of the Webby. But this will just purge. It'll keep, the Webby's still there, but it's just purging the data if they've been saved with data. That's one that customers like, being able to, delete instances based on certain criteria so that it stays low, so that's not always increasing. And again, if you have your backup running, if you do delete something and someone comes back in a week and says, oh, I really needed that, you can restore it very easily. But you're not keeping 1,000 instances at a time. You're just restoring that one. Makes it a lot easier to keep the size of the environment down. So there's so many different maintenance tasks that can be run, and then ways to do bulk updates so that it frees up your time to do more value-added tasks.
And, here anyway, 360, all the bulk updates that you want to do. If you want to do repointing, for example, if you want to do the repointing of UNV to UNX, once you've converted, that's something that you can do. And it's questionable, do you want to do it before or after? That's really a case by case and really how your budget is organized. So I think there's no golden rule on that. And some people will agree with one point, some other people will agree with the other. So I think it's not a good day to be arguing on that. Here, definitely working to help you to reduce all the maintenance and operational costs through all the bulk updates and all the automation.
Yep, crystal connection updates. So if you've got crystals and once you've moved them, you probably need to point them to another database. You can do that in bulk with 360. So there's a lot of time savers. You can go to universes as well.
It can be managed security as well. There are so many things. And then the last thing as well that's important is when there's like a new service pack that's applied, again, you'll need to be testing to make sure that your reports are actually accurate. So make sure that, apples are apples. It's not oranges. So that's, again, it won't change anything to the way that you're doing things today.
Right.
Pauline, anything else you want to add, or I think
No, I think we've covered that everything.
Okay. And then 360 Suite, we've actually put together like a package for PCE to support SAP. So we do offer subscription for that, and we'd be more than happy to convert, our on-prem customers to subscription to do this. So we've got the, the regular PCE edition that covers everything that we've presented today. And then we've got the managed edition. That's really cool, where we'll do all the quarterly updates, and then we will also provide 3 days of implementation and training. So there's actually quite a bit into that. By the way, if you got some questions on these packages, just copy the link in the chat that's below and send us a note, or afterwards you can do like contact@360suite.io or visit our website. We'll be more than happy to get back to you, trust me. And we'll be able to show you how we can help you as well around that. Okay, so what I'll suggest is now that we go to the next step of the event of today. So for the Q&A, so we'll have Chris, who's going to be back. By the way, we got a quiz around 4.3. I almost forgot about that. So it's pretty cool. So I think Chris from our marketing department is going to share the address in the chat box. I think it's a quiz around, if I recall, 10 questions. I scored over 80% of that quiz, so just make sure you try to beat me. and it's around to assess, how much you know around 4.3. So it's kind of fun, and you can benchmark yourself to others. So it's something fun. And by the way, there are actually some Amazon gift cards to win on that. And I hear actually Scott, who's part of our group, and Scott, you don't take that quiz because you're not eligible to win the Amazon gift card. So I know you'll try to do that and you'll put a fake name, so just don't do it. Okay. So for the Q&A, we've got Chris, we've got Patrick, we've got KJ, and then we got Pauline. So, let's take some questions for the next 30 minutes. Also, we got Patrick, who's back. And Patrick, was funny when you left earlier. It was like James Bond image.
Exactly.
That was cool. So, just on the rocks, So, okay, so let's take a couple questions. So in terms of questions, as there was one question from Pat Willinger, as a hospital deployment, we have to comply with HIPAA. What is the security around PC and protecting data? The reason I'm asking that is there are many hospitals out there that are actually leveraging business objects. And I know that's a very common question. So are there anything specific to security when it comes to HIPAA? Is it anything different from before, or is it actually a little bit better than before?
I would think, if anything, it's a little bit better, but I would push to you implementers to actually say what you really think about that. So,
and I would definitely agree.
It is a private cloud, first
Right.
of all. So your data is not intermingled with anyone else's. And there is the SAP Trust Center. There's a website. Just Google SAP Trust Center, and it gives you all the details on the security steps that SAP has taken for all of their cloud products.
And Patrick, since I hear you, by the way, I know you've been on the event all along, except we didn't see you. What's your main takeaway, from what you saw today? And of course, I know you're very familiar with PCE because we've been working together on many projects.
Yep. I guess my biggest takeaway still is really what we started off with, Bruno, which is I think that it's a great way for you to continue to use business objects in a much more cost-efficient manner, and probably in a more performant and efficient manner, I think. Especially as, not to call any of us on this old, right? But as even like the business objects administrators and those who initially implemented it start to perhaps age out of where they are in organizations, this is a great way for you to continue all of the great things that BobJ brings to your analytic needs without having to worry about some of that maybe arcane to some newer folks kinds of plumbing things we have to deal with.
Mm-hmm. And Tennessee Patrick, because that was initially my question was, is Patrick, we haven't introduced Patrick Nismith from Protiviti, so
I'll say hello to everyone. I'm Patrick Nismith. I'm a director on the SAP team at Protiviti, and I focus on data and analytics. So I've actually been working with business objects since about 2003. But the thing I'll say, I guess, about PCE, one of the great advantages of it is one thing we've seen with our clients in recent years is they haven't necessarily been staying up to date on versions. Business objects, even though it's still widely used, it's still the best product for scheduled reports that have to be burst out to many thousands of users. It's seen in a lot of organizations as being something that is difficult to maintain and requires a lot of resources and things like that. So PCE addresses that by putting all the infrastructure management and all of that, the upgrades on SAP, so that you can still leverage business objects, but then start, maybe using your time to go and do, more fun and exciting things like, getting insights out of Analytics Cloud and things like that too. So so that's certainly one thought I had there. The other thing I was actually happy to see, Bruno, is that you guys have a subscription model now for your products. So I know that's something Scott and I've been talking about for a while. So glad to see that you guys have added that.
Yeah, we want to fit whatever SAP is doing on that. So that's you're right. That's something that's actually quite good. Thank you very much, Patrick, or Tennessee Patrick versus DC Patrick.
Actually, I'm in Atlanta.
Okay, so sorry about that. Okay, we've got another question in terms of from Kim. Migration to PC, migration would be moving from Windows. How much help is included from SAP? For example, moving, converting GSNs, ODBCs, JDBC connections to PCE.
So I'll take that one first. That's where working with a partner is really important. One of the recommendations we make, is to de-risk your move to PCE. We'll help you do an upgrade and move to Linux on-premise so that we can address any concerns, at the time of upgrade, any concerns with going to Linux, like if you have OLADB connections, things like that, we can take care of it. And then it's just a like-for-like move when we go up to PCE. So that's what we've been doing with clients. That seems to be working really well and really helps de-risk, the move to PCE.
Okay. Let's take another question. I think there was a question from AJ regarding recovering instances. Could be nice too. Is this a question that you can show up, Chris? Or
recovering instances? What we call it?
Or we'll just show it after. There was a question from Scott. Will SAP convert third-party licensing? Our BOBJ licensing is provided via non-SAP ERP.
So regardless if it's non part of an ERP contract or if it's standalone, we can provide the right path to PCE.
Great.
Okay.
It may not be easy, but we'll get there.
Thanks a lot. We have another question. We have Webby reports currently using local Oracle databases as a data source through universes using the Oracle relational client on the BOBJ servers. How will that be handled in PCE?
So we do support Oracle database drivers, so JDBC drivers. However, one thing is good to be aware of that we will have to require the customer to provide the software from Oracle with some, of course, agreements that they've been allowed to give the software to SAP. So, but we will install Oracle JDBC drivers with the TNS names and set that up.
Okay. Thank you. Let's take another question. I'm now suddenly lost with all the questions. Okay, we have Webby reports currently using local Oracle. No, sorry about that. That one was covered. So does PC support Snowflake? And does PC have a proof of concept available? I know Snowflake's pretty popular these days, and
to my knowledge, and with BusinessObjects 4.3, we support Snowflake today, and so yes, we do support Snowflake. And for a POC environment, I would advise to maybe look into something called the SAP Cloud Appliance Library. You'll find some BusinessObjects 4.3 instances in there that run on hyperscalers. We don't have it directly a PCE POC at the moment available, but if you're interested in seeing how how BusinessObjects runs on a cloud environment on any of the hyperscalers, something called the SAP Cloud Appliance Library will give you that.
And if I recall, KJ, I think it's since 4.2 SP8 that BobJ supports, I think, Snowflake. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, I'm quite sure. I know we had discussed about that before. And Patrick, Atlanta Patrick, and Keith, in terms of like a proof of concept, is this something that you guys see with the deployments with whom you're working towards PC? Is this something that's standard? What are your recommendations around that?
Yeah, I haven't seen any clients so far require a proof of concept. I mean, essentially, it's just Business Objects 4.3. So there's, to me, there's not a whole lot to prove out. We're just moving that deployment to the cloud. Most of these clients already have other applications deployed in the cloud. So I don't really see the huge need for a proof there.
KJ, any comments on that?
No, I would agree. I mean, I think really it's just, again, picking the cloud provider that they currently utilize, right? So, whether they're using AWS, Google, or something else, then it's really just focusing, here's just moving another application up to that cloud layer. So.
Exactly.
And, in your expert opinion, like, typically, whether it's PCE or going to moving to the cloud, we've seen over the years so many deployments complaining about performances. And I have some ideas behind, but what do you guys recommend to ensure? What are the good practices that you guys ensure or recommend to have proper performances when you're moving to the cloud and when you're going to PCE in terms of location, data location? Are there any good practices on that? Keith, Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the one thing I will add in there is you definitely need to understand where's your data going to be located, right? Because I mean that's a key for running those reports. Unless you're dealing with instances, right? Then it sort of takes that out of the equation. But if you're doing real-time reporting, you really need to sort of sit back and look at your architecture in terms of, are you making a round trip to get out to the cloud and then back to an on-premise data source? And then how big are those, how big is that data set coming back with those reports? So yeah, there's some stuff that you need to really sort of think through in terms of that. In some of the scenarios we deal with, the data sources have been moved to the cloud. So we try to keep that stuff sort of co-located with the solution as well, to take some of the sort of round trip out of the equation.
Yeah, I agree. That's what we're seeing. A lot of clients, like we mentioned, already have deployments in the cloud. They have their data sources in the cloud in a lot of cases. That's great. If they can be close together. Certainly some still have data sources on premise, and then it's just a matter of making sure that pipe, between whatever your cloud provider is and your on premise is sufficient to handle the load.
Yeah, and it's for some people it might sound like a very basic question, but that's really something that we've it makes a lot of sense basically to have your data as close as possible to your BobJ instance. So it's common sense, but that can be sometimes an issue, causing a lot of performance issues. We got another question from AJ. So how would recover the instances after they have been moved to network share? I have a Gov customer that is required to have access up to 7 years of history.
Yeah, so if you use 360 Suite to archive your instances, they'll be accessible, but it's outside of the CMS. So if you wanted to add them back, you could through the Launchpad import the file, or if it's just somebody needed it, you can email it. So it'll be in the form that they were. If it's a PDF, it'll be a PDF. If it's a Webby, it'll be a Webby. So it'll be in that form, and it can be added back to Business Objects, or emailed if it's just a matter of needing that actual instance.
And which specific 360 solution is doing that? I think that was a question from Brian.
That's 360 View.
Okay. We have another question from Pat. What connecting between SAP PC deployment to a separate AWS data warehouse or other data sources? Anybody want to take that question from Pat? Or do you need some more details from Pat, or something that we can take afterwards, which is all good?
If I understand the question right, then Pat is asking, how do we connect between PCE to a separate AWS data warehouse, right? Technically, it's the same as we would be connecting. We have the universes, then the drivers to connect to that data warehouse, and then you have, of course, the pipe and the available that you're able to connect wherever that data warehouse is located. Obviously, if you have an AWS data warehouse, you would probably run your PC in AWS as well.
Mm-hmm. Comments on that, Patrick, KJ, Pauline?
Yeah, so that sort of just goes back to your AWS architecture, right? So whether or not you're setting up peering between VPCs, right, or those wherever those services are located, or just setting up the essentially the firewall rules between those resources. So again, that's just sort of working through the logistics plumbing, as it were, for connecting the dots.
We got a question from Sven and around what about SAC Cloud connectors, also part of the operational services. So there were a lot of questions around SAC and, in fact, how it connects to PCE. Any comments around that?
Yeah, the SAC connectivity components are now part of the PCE. So if customers are interested in connecting through the live data engine between SAC and BusinessObjects, it's possible today that we support that as well. So you can have a truly a hybrid landscape with part of your BI, dashboards, stories running in SAC, and then some of your traditional reporting running on BusinessObjects, but also leveraging those universes with SAC through the live data engine.
And in terms of SAC, so I know some customers actually in the in the move going to PCE, some actually want to implement SAC because they've got all these dashboards and that type of reporting that could be well suited for SAC. Mm-hmm. And when people actually rework their contracts around licensing, so when they go to subscription, is there a path as well that SAP can provide to convert some of these dollars that are not being used for BOBJ towards SAC? Is this something that can be offered, or is it offered by SAP?
Yeah, the cloud extension policy that we've talked about trying to move people to SAC is the same here as well.
Okay. Yeah,
so you can retire unused maintenance and push that towards your cloud subscriptions.
That was the reason behind my question, because we see very often all these licenses not being used. And since you're working on your licensing, you might as well consider, well, if I want to use SAC, is there a way to recycle that part?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's been very beneficial to some of our clients, that ability to repurpose some business objects maintenance to Analytics Cloud. And so then they get the best of both worlds with that hybrid deployment of Analytics Cloud and business objects.
Okay. Okay, let's take some other questions. Okay, if it's Linux only, there is no AD SSO then?
Yeah, so AD plugin is not on Linux, but what we do is we support the LDAP plugin for AD authentication, so you can configure that for single sign-on. So there is AD SSO available, but it goes through a LDAP plugin. Bit different, but the same single sign-on.
End result.
Okay. Actually, I wasn't sure about that. We have another question. Not sure about how well 360 eyes work with Lumira. So that's for us. If not good, let's not display, but whatever. So
You're not supposed to read that part.
So,
it does work.
That's a lie. But it is.
It does, yeah. So we extract all, if you're using objects, we extract all the SQL and the metadata from Lumira, so you can do impact analysis on those as well with 360 eyes.
We've got another question from Jeff. What is the overall customer experience, in terms of response time? So I would say that's more question, I think for you, Chris, and also for Patrick and for KJ. What have you heard?
So I just recently heard from a customer that went live on PCE, and they were actually having a few seconds, up to even 5-10 seconds better response times now with PCE, because PCE has the latest infrastructure in terms of server performance, what the hyperscalers offer. They also were surprised how good the performance was on still having the on-prem database compared to their existing landscape. So they were still running reports of the on-prem database. So what I've heard is that that's been a positive anyway for this customer.
And if the question was not about response time, but more response, like from a support and connection standpoint, you do have your direct cloud manager. So in one way, I think it's going to be better because you're going to have a direct line to SAP now that you don't always have when you're having to go through the support queue.
And that's actually something that's highly appreciated from the customers that we have that went to PCE. So that's something we should have covered during the first part, but that's definitely a very good advantage. Because definitely the support there is much better. There was a question from Ken. Ken, you mentioned that T-shirt size recommendations are based on number of users, but didn't mention that if that is named users or concurrent sessions.
Yeah, so I think there's a conversion. I believe what I saw was a concurrent session is equivalent to 3 named users. So you do that conversion, and that's your total number of users.
So I see Chris moving his head. So that's the standard.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. So you multiply by 3 the number of concurrent sessions, and then you add the number of named users together, and then that gives you the T-shirt size.
Yep.
Okay. And that definitely I know is a question that a lot of people will want to know, because I do know a lot of people that are on concurrent. So, Pauline, any other questions? I think we can go on and on. Any questions that we should take, or do you see some questions in the comment box? I'm kind of getting lost in all the questions I've already covered. So there's a question from Kim. Does PC include predictive support? For example, when a new KBA defect is identified, will there be a proactive notification or fix? I lost all of you on that one.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's fine, and we can actually take that one elsewhere. In terms of patches, so let's say somebody goes on 4.3 SP2, at the end of the year, and that is supported with PCE. What's the policy in terms of patches? So how often will you implement patches? Is this something that you'll take them as they're needed? What's the policy?
Yeah, as they're needed. If we're talking about patches, and also service packs, they don't come automatically. That they don't get deployed without in a certain schedule. It's always consulted with the customer. When do they install? Because these are private cloud editions, so we install on the customer's time table, and whenever the customer is ready to go to the next service pack and do the testing needed.
Okay. We've got a question from Mayur, and I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing things right. How is BobJ PC positioned versus SAC? So what's the difference between BobJ and SAC, I would say, because, we could talk about PC and how will SAC, or how is SAC different?
So that's a much broader strategic question to some extent. I would say, BobJ still provides advantages from a scheduling publication standpoint and from some, pixel perfect or the way you need reporting to look and feel. When you get into self-service and the dashboard concept, whether that's, we call it a story or a dashboard or whatever you want to call it, I think SAC starts to show advantages there. But that's a much broader question per se. I mean, it's really, it goes back to the advantages of certain things for BobJ, not PCE per se. The advantages of PCE is to provide you the TCO and the management gains that we've talked about.
And we really want to help customers move their business objects workloads into the cloud,
Right.
but at the same time help them to take advantage of the public cloud with SAC and all the great features inside SAC, but kind of like both public and private cloud together.
And I think the advantage too, that the fact that we do ensure that all of the connectivity from PCE to SAC is there, you can start looking at those hybrid use cases as a way to start to ponder what you might want to offload into SAC versus sticking with BobJ, or if you want to stay with the combination of the two, we're good with that too.
Yeah. And that's typically what we're seeing is most of our clients, they're not getting rid of business objects and just going analytics cloud. It's a hybrid deployment. Both have their benefits. Obviously, lots of clients have, years worth of reports, thousands and thousands of reports that are still used all the time. And it doesn't make sense to rewrite those, but definitely clients want to use analytics cloud and leverage the smart insights, the predictive capabilities, all of that, to take their analytics to the next level.
And I've got one personal question, actually, that's something we were addressing with Pauline earlier, and that's always a good debate, and that's more for Patrick or Keith. People who will be converting, who will be going from UNV to UNX, and there are a lot of people still in UNVs, and there are a lot of people that have got both. It's although it's been a path for years. Do you recommend people doing that before going to PCE or after? What do you guys? What's the best approach and why? Or it's something that you want to agree on?
I'm not sure on that. I don't see any reason why you couldn't wait. And I'm not real sure on what the direction is from SAP right now on if UNVs are going away at some point.
Service Pack 2.
Yeah. So for right now, it's fine. You could move it, but if you're gonna do a major move, maybe it is the time to look at that too. It's really more up to the individual client and when they want to take that on. Some of it probably goes back to what you guys were talking about earlier, Bruno, about looking at what's really used and doing some cleanup. Maybe some, you might discover that some of those UNVs don't actually need to be converted at all because people aren't using the underlying reports. So I think, it's something that we need to look at, on a client by client basis and see what makes sense.
KJ, any comments on that? Do you agree or
yeah, I would agree. I don't think it matters one way or the other as long as you're not running the, Service Pack 2 yet, which the rest of us in the real world aren't yet. In terms of when to do it, I would sort of agree. If you know you're going to be moving into a new environment, the housekeeping is never a bad thing, right? Figure out what you're still running, what you're not running. And while you've got the opportunity to do that housekeeping, maybe tackle that UNV piece of it now before later when you're really migrating everything over there.
Okay. You know what? Let's take one final question from Chris, and then after that we'll wrap up. Not clear on how access to the client tools IDT, UDT, Web-rich client is accomplished with PCE.
Yes, so I think I mentioned that already earlier, but basically the client tools access is pretty much similar handled like it is today with the on-premise. So the client tools will connect with TCP/IP or HTTPS onto your server and connect to your server same way from the desktop of the users. Although now your business object server is not running on a locally, but it's in the hyperscaler environment.
The one thing I will add to that is you need to make sure you've set up your network access rules to be able to support that connectivity, because that is because those are additional ports that wouldn't tend to be opened automatically, right?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and that's a great point. That's one thing I will say that's we've learned in these first few deployments is that it really does take a lot of coordination between us as the implementation partner, SAP, and the client, to make sure that all the the right ports are being open and things like that. So we definitely need the support of the client's infrastructure and security teams and things like that to make sure all these little things like ports and all are handled timely.
And before we go, I've got two final questions for Patrick and KJ's. First, Patrick is, we've known your company for years. And for the audience that doesn't know Protiviti, what's the value of Protiviti? Why should people go with you to go to PC? What value do you bring to these customers?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, we've been doing this, business objects. Many people on our team have been doing business objects since prior since probably the 90s. Actually, I started in 2003. But we've been a long time, not just a business objects partner, but then certainly after business objects was acquired by SAP. We've been a gold partner and continue to be very strong in the business objects and analytics space. And so actually, SAP brought us in on probably their biggest PCE deal to date. And we helped make the client comfortable with it and help close a $2 million plus deal for SAP that. And so that's moving along very nicely now with I can't talk to a lot about that one, but anyway, yeah, we've definitely got the chops in both the PCE space, but we've been doing cloud with business objects since AWS first came out. We were a launch partner with them with business objects deployments on AWS. So yeah, we've been doing the cloud business objects thing for a lot longer than PCE's been around.
So it's not something new. And by the way, on that opportunity, we're very happy to be working with you as well on it. So that's good.
Absolutely.
KJ, what can you say about, what's the value for people that don't know you and don't know CB on data?
So where we differentiate is we're based here in Northern Virginia. So our major customer space is the federal government. So again, working with our federal customers in terms of understanding the migrations to the cloud. We've been working within the Gov Cloud space since the early days, focusing initially in business objects and analytics, and now we've started to broaden that out in terms of our HANA, BW for HANA, BPC deployments as well. So that's that is truly our core competency when it comes to our federal customers.
Guys, thank you very much. And as I said when we started, make sure you watch the game tonight. I'm in France, so it's
Go
already
Germany.
time. Go France. 2-1. We can talk tomorrow. We need to put bets on. So make sure you watch the game tonight. I hope you all had a good time. The recording will be available on YouTube, or you can ask us the recording. We'll be more than happy to share it at contact@360suite.io. Thanks to Billion, for Chris Pritchard, for Patrick Sims, for Patrick Nesmith, Keith Johnson, Pauline Lancaster, and then behind the scene, thank you very much for Tony. Thank you for Pauline. Thank you from Chris, for making all this possible and making things pretty smoothly. That's all, folks. And, thanks again for joining. Be good, stay cool. And remember, visit 360suite.io. Have a good day, guys, and 2-1 tonight. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bruno.
Thanks, Bruno.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.